I never considered myself a vengeful person. I had always believed in fairness, understanding, and the importance of forgiveness. But that belief, much like my marriage, came crashing down on a Saturday evening at an upscale party thrown by one of my wife's colleagues. The night began innocently enough. Lydia and I had been married for 8 years, and although things hadn't been perfect lately, I still thought of us as a team. We walked into the party together, her arm hooked around mine. She wore a silver cocktail dress that shimmered under the warm glow of the chandelier. She laughed, her auburn hair cascading over her shoulders, effortlessly drawing admiration from everyone we passed. She looked radiant, and I felt a familiar sense of pride that she was my wife. At first, the evening was a blur of small talk and the clinking of champagne glasses. Lydia introduced me to a few of her colleagues, one of whom was him, Mark. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and had that cocky grin of someone who thinks the world owes him respect. Lydia had mentioned him before, a new member of her team, smart, ambitious, and incredibly charming. At first, he seemed polite enough, but I couldn't help but notice his eyes lingering a bit too long on Lydia's neckline. I brushed it off, convincing myself I was overthinking it. But as the night wore on, a feeling of unease settled in my gut. Lydia and Mark kept finding themselves engrossed in conversation. Their laughter rang out, rising above the noise of the party like a private joke. I sipped my drink, forcing smiles through conversations I wasn't even paying attention to. My eyes kept darting back to Lydia, and she seemed flattered by his attention. Her cheeks were flushed, but not from the champagne. I told myself to relax. Jealousy wasn't a good look. Lydia loved me. We had a life together. No man, no matter how confident or charming, could come between us. That illusion shattered when I saw it. I was heading back from the bar with a fresh drink in hand when I saw them by the balcony. Lydia was turned slightly away from me, her laughter still ringing in the air. Mark's hand was resting on the small of her back, lower than it had any right to be. Then, in slow motion, I saw his hand slip under the hem of her skirt. My blood turned to ice. She didn't slap him. She didn't push him away. She didn't do anything. Instead, she tilted her head and bit her lip in a way I knew too well. My drink almost slipped from my hand. For a moment, I froze, my mind reeling. Was this real? Had I misunderstood? But no, there was no mistaking the look in her eyes or the smirk on his face. Fury surged through me like wildfire, and my hands trembled as I fought the urge to storm over and shatter his smug face. But I didn't. Instead, I turned and left the party without a word, my mind racing with plans for reckoning. The next few days were a blur of pretending. I needed to control my emotions. I needed time to think. Lydia acted as if nothing had happened. Her behavior remained unchanged, which only made the pain deeper. I couldn't confront her yet. Not without proof. Confrontation would only lead to lies, excuses, and deflections. I needed leverage. I needed a plan. I began digging. Lydia wasn't as careful as she thought. A quick glance at her phone while she showered revealed a string of flirtatious texts with Mark. This wasn't just a one-night thing. It had been going on for months. The betrayal hit me like a freight train. But I swallowed the pain and let it fuel my determination. Mark wasn't just a sleazy coworker. He was married. His wife, Rebecca, was a quiet but kind woman I had met once at a company event. She didn't deserve this any more than I did. I reached out to her anonymously, sharing just enough to spark her suspicion. The enemy of my enemy was about to become my greatest ally. With Rebecca's help, the plan came together perfectly. We arranged a dinner party, inviting Lydia and Mark under the pretense of celebrating some vague work achievement of Lydia's. Lydia, unsuspecting, was thrilled at the idea, especially since Mark and his wife would be there. She even asked me to pick out the wine. The irony almost made me laugh. The night of the dinner arrived, and I played the perfect host. Rebecca and I exchanged knowing glances, our mutual disgust at the situation binding us in a temporary alliance. Lydia and Mark, completely oblivious to the storm brewing, were all smiles and stolen glances. Their arrogance only fueled my resolve. Halfway through dinner, I excused myself to grab a special dessert from the kitchen. That was the signal. Rebecca followed me a few moments later, leaving Lydia and Mark at the table, likely basking in their delusions of secrecy. What they didn't know was that the dining room was wired. Cameras, microphones, every word, every touch, captured in crystal clear detail. Rebecca had suggested the idea, and I set it all up myself, my hands steady despite the fury that was bubbling just beneath the surface. As we returned to the table, I made a show of raising my glass for a toast, to trust and transparency. Lydia's smile faltered slightly, but she quickly recovered. The others followed suit, raising their glasses. Dessert was served, but none of us ate much. The tension in the room was suffocating, thick with unspoken words. Finally, I set my fork down and leaned back in my chair. "There's something I'd like to share," I said calmly, my voice firm. Lydia's eyes flicked to mine, unease flashing across her face. I picked up a remote from the table and pressed a button. The television on the wall flickered to life, displaying a frozen image. Lydia's face went pale as she recognized the scene. The party. The balcony. Her and Mark's betrayal, frozen in time. "What is this?" she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Evidence," I replied, simply pressing play. The room fell silent as the video played. Every damning detail laid bare. Rebecca's face turned hard, her eyes locked on Mark, whose confident demeanor crumbled in an instant. Lydia turned to me, tears welling in her eyes, but I raised a hand to stop her before she could speak. "I don't want to hear your excuses," I said coldly. "This isn't about salvaging anything. This is about accountability." Rebecca stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "Mark," she said, her voice trembling with fury, "you will be hearing from my lawyer. And don't even think about coming home tonight." Mark opened his mouth to protest, but she silenced him with a glare that could have melted steel. He slumped in his chair, defeated. As for Lydia, she cried, begging for forgiveness, pleading that it meant nothing, that it was a mistake. But her words were hollow. Her tears fell on deaf ears. "This isn't just about you and me," I said, my voice steady. "It's about respect, for our marriage, for yourself, and you threw it all away. For what? A cheap thrill?" I stood, looking down at her one last time. "I'll be filing for divorce first thing tomorrow. The papers are already prepared. And don't think you're walking away with anything more than what you brought into this marriage. I've been careful. Very careful." Lydia's sobs grew louder, but I felt nothing. The love I once had for her had been replaced by a cold, impenetrable wall. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Mark's wife followed through on her promise, filing for divorce and exposing his actions to both their social and professional circles. He was forced to resign from his position, his reputation in tatters. Lydia tried reaching out in the weeks that followed, but I blocked her number, her emails, her pleas for a second chance. I had no interest in reconciliation. I focused on rebuilding my life, free from the weight of betrayal. I moved to a new city, started a new job, and found solace in the clarity that comes with letting go. The experience had been painful, but it was also liberating. I was no longer shackled by doubt or misplaced loyalty. Revenge may not undo the past, but it can certainly balance the scales.